Sorry about that. I had my microphone off all that time. Gently close the eyes if you like. If you like, also, you can have the eyes partially open or partially closed with a little bit of light coming through. Sometimes, if we're extremely tired or almost exhausted, sometimes we have to have the eyes open a little bit in order to, gain a little bit of mental energy and let the light come through the eyes. And as Paul and I were talking a little while ago, some people meditate with the eyes open. If that's your situation, just gaze about 3 or 4 feet in front of you and try not to look about. But for the most part, with the eyes closed, just bring our attention to the body. And what we mean by bringing the attention to the body is not necessarily bringing your attention to one particular area, although you could. But when we bring our attention to the body, we're actually admitting that there is a mind and a body, two different entities of us, what seemingly makes us. And both of them, both of these things are something that is used throughout life, and they're both of them are used in our meditation as well. Although once we get concentrated and relaxed, the body itself takes a back seat, I guess you could say. If the body's relaxed and there's no noticeable pain, it can quickly fade off into the background. And I know it does for many people, maybe not all meditators, but for many of them. And so we want to use the body and notice the body, pay attention to it, place our awareness on it, usually at the beginning of the meditation, because it's the vehicle that got us here. It actually drove our car to get us here for most of us. The body walked through the door and into this building, and we found our cushion or chair. The body is now making itself comfortable, or attempting to anyway. And so we can use the body as a meditation object. The entirety, such as doing a body scan, or sweeping, connecting the breath with the visualization of sweeping the body with relaxation as we breathe out. Or if we want to relax a certain portion or area of the body, bringing our attention to this area of the body, and as we breathe out, just breathe relaxation into it or through it. And we can also bring our attention to an individual part of the body, such as the breath itself, which is the body breathing, the body doing one of its primary functions. So the body breathes on its own. Or we can pay attention to it. It's one of the beautiful things about the breath, information about breath meditation. It can be extremely boring and it can be extremely interesting, all depending on where we place our attention and how we look at it and what our intention is. And so even focusing on the breath can be different for each person. It might be different for us each day. But we're using the breath as a tool to bring us into this presence that we're talking about. It's primarily a meditation object, a very, very common meditation object. So with the eyes closed and the attention on the breath, the body relaxed, the spine comfortable but fairly erect or straight. We should feel very balanced. Perhaps we want to remind ourselves to lift the chin or keep it lifted a little bit. And we want to really be energized in our posture, in our practice. And allow that very positive energy to flow up and down the body. And with that energy within the body, we can actually become inspired with our practice. And when we become inspired, we become energetic beings that are really quite happy to be in this moment. So focusing on the breath, we might focus on one area, such as the tip of the nose. We might follow the breath, the top of the inhalation, the middle, down to the bottom of the exhalation, either feeling it or visualizing it. We might even count the breaths. And if we become very subtle, sometimes it feels as if the body is just breathing on its own with very, very little effort on our part. And if we want to try to keep that energy going, we can just kind of focus on the top of the inhalation. If we want to relax, we can focus on the bottom of the exhalation. Many different ways to look at the breath. But we come in to a room like this with our friends and sit in meditation probably with the hopes of just being a little bit happier than we were before coming in, perhaps. Maybe we come in because we just simply feel better by doing this practice on a Wednesday night. Sometimes we just get in the habit of coming in here and seeing our fellow meditators, something that we enjoy doing without really much effort as far as thinking about why we do it. So there's no right or wrong about coming here or meditating periodly. You know, the home practice is very important, and gatherings are important as well for many, many people. But if we came here to enhance our lives in any way, it's something that is very common. We all want to feel a little bit more complete. And we come to a point where we realize that the outer world isn't providing that. We try it again and again and again. And we come to a point where we realize that maybe this happiness and this joy is something that can come from inside. And so we shut our eyes and sit in a quiet room. Very little smells, no tastes. Try to make our bodies as comfortable as possible and go within. And in that process, we notice that there's feelings, sensations, states, all sorts of thoughts, our perceptions. But we try to kind of numb the senses in a way so that we get a better chance of really understanding ourselves. And what that means is that the mental activity begins to slow down or become simpler in some way. Or at least we begin to understand it, or we can see it better. And through that process, we generally realize that in order for us to be happy, it has to come from within us. And there's nothing in the outside that is going to provide any lasting, permanent happiness for us. We just get tired of searching and looking and doing the same old things again and again, looking for people, places, or things that can provide what we actually want, which is just some contentment. And once we find that in our meditation practice, we know that we're getting somewhere because the happiness is coming from within. It's like the separate self has stepped out of the way for a moment because it's instructed to do so. And then we get a chance to see our true nature, let that shine through. And then in that realization, we can express it in many different ways, but for the most part, it's if we examine it, we'll see that it's really unconditional love for others and for everything, and including, and maybe most importantly, ourselves. And it's probably one of the biggest messages, or the deepest treasure that we can find, from our meditation practice is that discovery that it's very, basically, very, very simple, that we all want and need and want to share unconditional love. Because that brings us our happiness that we've been looking for all along. So rather than looking for a lost article in the dark, we can actually close our eyes and go within and do some self-discovery. We don't have to be searching for anything with a flashlight, but searching with awareness is all. And trying to find and noticing that spark of acceptance and compassion and love that's within all of us. And so we bring our attention to the breath. When our attention finds something more interesting, in other words, when it wants to go into the past or the future or into some type of thinking process, such as fantasy, we catch that, we shine that light of awareness on that, and then we come back to the breath. Very simple practice. Does everybody have one of these? Of course, this is the Loving Kindness Sutra. We'll recite this together. To attain the state of peace, one skilled in goodness should be able, upright, perfectly upright, gentle in speech, kind, and free from pride, contented, easily satisfied, with limited duties and unburdened livelihood, controlled in senses, discreet, reserved, and not blindly attached to groups. One should not commit the slightest wrong, that the wise might censure, wishing, may there be happiness and security, may all beings be happy. Whatever beings there are, whether feeble or strong, tall or short, large, medium, or small, microscopic or mammoth, leaving none, seen or unseen, living near or far away, born or to be born, may all beings be happy. Let one not deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere, neither in anger nor in ill will should one wish another harm. Just as a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so, one should cultivate a limitless concern for all living beings. Extend loving kindness throughout the world without limitation, above, below, across, free of obstruction, enmity, or hostility. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, one should diligently sustain this mindfulness. This is called sublime living. Without holding narrow views, but being endowed with broad vision and avoiding attachment to sense desires, the virtuous are not born again into this world. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. And may we have the patience, the courage, and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or difficulties that we might face in life. Thank you very much. I hope your meditation was a good one. The people online, I apologize, I had my microphone off for the first 15 minutes and turned it on right when I started guiding the meditation. So sorry about that. Hope we didn't lose anybody. Anyway, most of you know that we've set aside this time for any kind of questions or comments or sharing, and if nobody speaks up or has anything to share, I just keep talking. And that's because that's what I do, you know. And anytime you have any questions or anything, just bring them up. So we put out an invitation to basically look for obstacles, look for problems, and use our awareness, to see these things and how key awareness is, in our practice. And it is probably the most important thing in many ways, because it's the part that does the healing for us. It's, we're not supposed to be striving and fixing in meditation. It's not a time for self-psychotherapy either, but it's a time for noticing. And awareness, the hallmark of awareness is knowing. When we are aware of something, we know it's there. We know that it's happening, or we know that it exists. That is, our awareness. And the same is true when we have discursive thoughts or negativity, or those hindrances or obstacles that I was talking about. Just to be aware of them. And for the most part, they come up and we are aware of them, and then they dissipate and we come back to the breath. But other times we come back to the same thing again and again, and that's when we want to take a little bit more serious look at it. And that means that we usually want to, not necessarily in our meditation, But the byproduct of the meditation, being mindful outside of our meditation formal practice, we want to investigate some of these things and why this negativity keeps coming up for us in the same way, this habitual pattern of the mind. And that usually means that we have to revisit something, something that happened, as a child or whatever it might be. And again, that's kind of out of the realm of our meditation practice, but it gives us a cue that there is something up when the mind keeps reverting back to the same thing. And then we know what we have to work with, because if it causes any kind of feelings of incompletion, that's something that we have to take a look at. And but as most of us know, the meditation will help point that out to us. There's something interesting that came to mind. We're not supposed to be thinking when we're meditating, but something came into mind when Paul and I were talking before. It doesn't take much to get my mind going, I guess, but Paul and I were talking before we started meditating about, Paul does some of the teachings, like he went through the teacher training program, and then he does some teaching over at the temple on Thursday nights, and Sunday too, on Sunday mornings. And we were talking about the story of the Buddha, and how he came about. But a lot of us know the story of the Buddha, this guy, and this dude. The kind of a side note from that is something called the hero's journey, something that Terry brought up in the girls group. So the girls that are in her women's group know about the hero's journey, and it's like a 12-step program to adventure. Really, there's 12 steps to the hero's journey, and that's basically what that is every movie, probably every successful movie ever made, followed this format of the hero's journey. And it starts out, and you can check this out, as I tell you this. I'm just going to tell you briefly because it's leading up to something. But in these steps, the first 10 minutes of a movie is about the hero, the heroine, heroess, or the hero, we'll just call him the hero of the movie. So, but the first 10 minutes will be his ordinary life, a person's ordinary life, and how they go through, just an every average, everyday person. And then there's a call to adventure that comes up. And then, so there's like Spider-Man gets bit by the spider, that kind of thing. And then, so this call comes up, but the hero denies it and says, nah, that's nothing. And then they meet somebody that says, you should really be taking a look at that thing that happened. Could be something big. So the person, the hero in the movie goes, yeah, maybe you're right. And so he leaves behind his normal everyday existence, his normal life, and he crosses that junction into the area of being a hero. So he comes across this obstacle, this big thing that he has to overcome. And, that's like the heart of the movie, overcoming this. And he, but before that, he meets his foes, and he meets his enemies and his friends and the people that are going to help him. Maybe he meets the girl, it's going to be next with him, like James Bond would meet the girl or something. And then there's that big obstacle that comes up, and the hero has to find a way, a method to overcome this obstacle. But sure enough, he does overcome it. Then he gets the reward, like James Bond would get the girl, or whatever it might be. So there's a reward, and then it seems like everything's going back to normal. But then there's a resurgence of this problem. This, like the I don't know, the Dracula comes back to life or something like that. And it's happening again. So this person has to use all of his tools that he learned, all these different things that he learned to overcome this obstacle again. And sure enough, he does. You know, he takes care of it, and then there's the rest of the journey home, and all of these things that he's learned, you know, within the hero's journey, he takes back to his ordinary life, and it teaches the people or helps the other people, you know, in his ordinary life. And so these are like the 12 steps of a movie. Every successful, whether it's an adventure film, has those elements in it. And when we're talking about the Buddha's story, very much the same thing. The Buddha, he did have somewhat of an ordinary life. You know, life of in his case, it was life of a prince. And you know, we actually are living much better than the Buddha did back when he was a prince, you know, 2,600 years ago. Our lifestyle is much better than his. So he kind of had an ordinary life. And then he found, you know, this, he went out, and as a prince, he found the sickness, that life was basically aging sickness, aging, or, you know, being born, aging, getting sick, and dying. So he saw that there was suffering in the world, but he wanted to overcome that. And he overcame that by doing all sorts of, you know, really tough practices, ascetic practices, where he was basically starving himself. But the real part of the story is when he finally stopped those ascetic practices and got some strength back. He ate some food that woman gave him, a young girl, a village girl, had some, like a rice porridge that she gave the Buddha, and he ate it, and he said, you know, that's when he came up with the middle way, you know, like between these these practices that were basically killing him and this abundant life that he had. So he wanted to come in between that somehow and be healthy, be able to practice meditation, and get down to business. And which means that the heart of the story is that he went underneath the Bodhi tree and sat in meditation. That's when the resurgence came up. He saw in his meditation practice, he saw Mara, you know, this evil entity that tried to pull him out of his meditation practice, tried to, you know, tease him with his daughters and all of these hindrances, you know, that we talked about earlier. You know, the desire for this and that, and restless and worry and doubt and all these things. But he overcame that in his actual meditation practice. And that's really the heart of the Buddhist story. And then when he overcame that, he actually awoke and became enlightened during that meditation practice. He saw his true nature. He's basically, that was the end of seeking for him, seeking for this happiness that he thought that everybody thinks that they can find out there, that fools us again and again and again. So if he would have let the Mara interact with his meditation, he would have not had that opportunity to awaken. And of course, we wouldn't be sitting here with this next to us either, you know, like it has been for the last 2,600 years. So, and when he came back out of, you know, so he had this resurgence of, you know, what he was, these disturbances, these hindrances, these obstacles, and he came out of it. He was enlightened, but then he actually had another obstacle, which was what to do with this. He really didn't know what to do with it. He didn't think that people would really understand what he was trying to tell people, that suffering is really the root. You know, the suffering that we have is based on our wanting things, physical and even mental, wanting things to be different or wanting more of this and that, and that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way at all. And that once we stop that seeking, that is when we wake up and when the enlightenment happens. And so really the end of that hero's journey is when he finally settled in and said, okay, I will start teaching. And he taught the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching that he gave at Deer Park in India. And we come across that all the time in our meditations too. Like in just one meditation, we can cover that entire process. You know, we sit in meditation, just an ordinary person sitting in meditation. We close our eyes, and all of a sudden, there's this obstacle that comes up for us. You know, what are we going to do with this? And it's different for everybody. You know, it could be something minor, it could be something major, something that keeps coming up for us. You know, these habitual patterns of the mind. And what do we do with these things? And usually we overcome them. We come back to the breath, everything is fine. Then they come up again. Come back to the breath, everything is fine. And eventually, you know, when we have a consistent practice in meditation, these things come up again and again. After a while, they don't affect us at all. And we can take that part of our practice out in the world, so we can walk out that door and not have any of these things bother us the same way that they bothered us when we came in. That's really the idea behind meditation, that it works, you know, that it actually does work that way. Otherwise, why would we even do it? If it only helps us out while we're meditating, why would we do it? You know, it has to have an impact off of the cushion, you know, when we're not doing our formal practice as well. But we have to do the formal practice to get there. And again, really what I'm talking about is, you know, two terms: awareness and mindfulness. You know, these mind states that allow us to be open and free and filled with unconditional love. The thing that I was talking about when we started the meditation. Take these wonderful qualities of mind and know that the only time that we're really bothered and hurt by something is when we believe that there's somebody that can actually be hurt by these things, when there's a separate self, when we're separated from everything else in the world, when there's that oneness, another word for unconditional love, that oneness with others and with everything, that pain and that suffering doesn't happen to us. That's really the message of the Buddha. And part of that, again, is realizing that nothing out there is going to fill that need for us. You know, temporarily, as long as we know that, then we can experiment. You know, we can try the chocolate, we can try the relationships and the new cars, and the shiny stuff, and tasty stuff. But as long as we understand that it's only temporary, it's not going to provide lasting happiness for us. And the only thing that's really lasting, according to the Buddha, is the nirvana. You know, the waking up, nirvana. And that the first sign of that is the evaporation or the elimination of the separate self. You know. Any questions about that? Very silent. I love it.
Somebody wrote a book called The Hero's Journey, right? It's a popular book.
Yeah.
Cameron, yeah.
Campbell.
Campbell, right?
Joseph
Yeah,
Campbell.
Campbell.
Yeah. Yeah, you can find, if you want to find out more information on it, just go online. Or, just go online and look up Hero's Journey, and it's all right there. Yeah.
Star Wars, Luke Skywalker.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Classic.
yeah.
Very spiritual, yeah.
Every adventure film out there, you know. You can think about just about any movie, and it doesn't matter, even if the the neat thing about these movies is that, you know, they all go through the same system, but then they have Rocky 2 or whatever, or, you know, Crocodile Dundee 2, and then they go through the same process again. So it's like that's how we can compare it with our lives and use it with our own experiences. It's just not one adventure and then you're done. No, it's one after another after another. It could be one moment, one meditation, or one day, or 1 year. When we look at our lives, our you know, it's the same way for us. It's but yeah, anybody that has studied creative filmmaking, they know all about the hero's journey, and they use that. And George Lucas probably has it tattooed on the inside of his eyelids. You know?
Yeah, the Matrix.
Matrix for sure.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, what's it? The
Terminator.
Terminator, yeah.
Fisher King with Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's usually the first 10 minutes, just normal, everyday existence, you know? And then everybody is kind of easing into it, and like, what is this movie about? And then all of a sudden, bang, something happens.
Mm.
Yeah. The last, well, I was going to say, The Last Mohican was one of them too, but The Last Avatar, or the Avatar.
Avatar?
Mm.
Avatar. There's another movie called The Last Avatar. Maybe that was a different movie.
The Last Airbender.
Pardon me?
The Last Airbender.
Oh, Last Airbender, yeah. Yeah. That was The Last Airbender too, I think. But, you know, the journey that we put ourselves through is, you know, the journey of life. It could be the entire thing. It could just be, you know, one simple idea that we have. We could wake up one morning, and I suggest people try this, that ask yourself, what one amazing thing am I going to do today? Just one thing, you know, that changes everything for us or for somebody else. And it's pretty interesting, you know, that how many times have we come close to doing that one thing that can change a person's life, ours or somebody else's, but we kind of hesitate. We don't go there. We don't actually push the button, so to speak, you know, just because it might feel uncomfortable or something.
Some of us never go after that call to action and then spend our
call.
lives. That was kind of the takeaway when I presented it. It's one of the rabbit holes I went down reading about it said that's true of most of us.
Yeah.
That's one of the big sadnesses
That-
in our life, that we don't go after that call to adventure.
And that's the second
Just
step.
now. Yeah.
That's the second step. Out of the 12 steps, we don't go past the second step, you know. Most people. Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, there's a flip side to that, though, too. Sometimes we have huge impacts on people's lives without even realizing it. You know, it's an incredible thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot, I think. Yeah, and I guess the thing to be look back on our own lives and see what we've done, you know, for ourselves, you know, to really appreciate what we've done. And sometimes we're hard on ourselves. We don't really notice, you know, the
Always.
things that, yeah. It takes somebody else to point that out to us, you know. And usually we deny it all. It's nothing. No. Yeah.
It's a wonderful life, right, Chris? It's a wonderful life. Yeah.
At Christmas, kind of a Christmas story. Wonderful life. Jimmy Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
How do we start talking about movies? That wasn't my intention, but
It's the movie night.
movie night. Again, I was going to bring my calendar and I forgot to bring it, but there's some flyers, you know, on the wall over here that you can take some things with. There's a mala making thing that's really going to be a lot of fun. make malas. I forgot to wear mine, but Paul's got some on.
Mhm.
But 21 bead mala, we'll make them and show you how to use them in your